It is day 3, and today we're going to get into the lighting settings. And so that is going to be setting up all of our lighting settings here and getting a sky in here. You're going to notice that the sky is a Skydome, not a skybox. And so we're going to talk about that. Here we go. So I'm going to go to Window and Lighting. Now, I like to dock it here by the inspector. And let's start at the very top, Skybox. And we could select the Skybox like the default Skybox, but as we see in the Oculus documentation here, avoid Unity's default Skybox, which is computationally expensive for mobile. We recommend setting the Skybox to none and ambient color, the ambient source to a color. And we also need to set the camera clear flags, but that should be done already. But if we need to, we could go to the camera inspector and see here it's clear flagged the skybox. And so what they're saying here is you may wish to set the camera clear flags to a solid color. So we could say solid color right here. So it's not going for the not clear flag on the skybox. And now there's no skybox being used. And so how do we get a sky? We actually have to, we don't have to, but we're going with what's best here. We should be using a Skydome. And so this is a really good YouTube video on Skydome techniques. And I'm just going to make a really quick basic Skydome with Maya. And it's basically the same exact process for, Blender or any other 3D modeling software. We just need to make a sphere and invert the normals and apply a sky texture with the UV editor. So I'm just going to say polygon primitives and make a sphere. And I want to go to the channel here. And by the way, it's not going to be a good idea for me to do 3D modeling tutorials because I am not a 3D artist and I'm really bad at these 3D modeling programs. I like Maya the best because it works pretty well with Unity. But anyways, it's probably not good for me to get into 3D modeling tutorials. So I'm going to go to a scale of 1000 on the scale here in the channel box. And so that's going to make it nice and big because we need a huge dome for the sky. And so that's not going to have really any perspective change as we move throughout our level. So the other thing that we're going to need to do is apply a texture to this. So I'm going to go to Windows and Rendering Editors, Hypershade. And it probably has the Lambert 1 on it already, so I could just look at the Lambert 1 and this, I can't see the color change because the color's on the outside. So we're going to want to apply a image to that, which I could do here. First, let's get an image. I'll just grab one from CG Skies here, and there's a JPEG sample here. And so I'm just going to open that up with Photoshop. And before we do that, let's just apply that file. And we could select that image there. And it's probably not going to show unless I do the hit number 6 on the keyboard. Okay, so the problem here is you can see is the big black strip at the bottom. And so what I'm going to do here is just double click that so it becomes a layer, and I'll make a new layer, and I'm going to put a shape here that's going to be covering up the whole bottom part. And then I don't want it to have a border at all. And then I will just resize it a little bit, and it doesn't have it's not showing anything at all right now, so I'm gonna double click it, hit OK there, double click it, not the color, so I can adjust add a gradient overlay. And then I'm just gonna grab the gradient here, and we'll pick one of the colors like this near the clouds for the top color, and then the bottom color, something lighter actually. What it come with looks pretty good, but maybe we'll do this color. So it has a gradient on it, and I could still see the black, so I'm just going to use the keyboard to nudge that up where there's no... And there's still a pretty solid line that we could see here, so I'm just going to color select right at the... color select right there at the edge, and then grab the brush tool, and I'm gonna zoom out just a little bit. I'm gonna get the brush tool started about here with a click, and then hold down shift and click again, and I could still see that line. And I should be doing this brush on a new layer that's above everything. So let me try this again. Click here and all the way to the end by holding shift with the brush tool there. And for the tutorial, that's good enough. I'm just gonna save this as a PNG is fine, even though there's no transparency and no compression, because we want Unity to handle compression. Okay, so I'm going to close Photoshop. We should be done, and let me change that to the sky PNG there so we can see what it looks like. And what we want to do is just I right click with the mouse here and hold it down to go to face selection mode, and that should select everything. And if I say mesh display reverse, that should reverse the faces. Okay, so with the faces reversed, if we go inside, we could see that the sky's saved. Now, what I can do here is I could say send to Unity, so I got to say set Unity project because I haven't done that yet. And that's in my documents, Unity 5. And this one is called VR Tutorial Game. And so now I could just say send to Unity. I'm going to select it. Send to Unity selection. And then we're going to name it. It's asking us what folder. It's going to go in the root of assets. So we'll just call it Skydome. So back in Unity, that's gonna the FBX is here, and it imported the material as well. So if I look at the Skydome, we need to bring in the sky PNG that was from the Photoshop. Okay, so if we go to the scene and we bring the Skydome in, it probably has that material applied, but it may not have the texture on it. We're gonna go to, we don't want to use standard shader. We need to go to, I'm gonna go to mobile unlit and select the sky texture there. Now Unity's, I could see inside of it in Unity because Unity's not rendering the back face. So that's actually pretty small looking. So I'm going to increase the size in Maya. But before we do that, it's working. So if we were to increase the scales here to 10,000, and that's no good. We want that scale to be at 1. And so what we could do is we could go to the model. We should adjust it in Maya, but we can. It doesn't have a rig, and we could do a scale factor of 10, probably 10,000. There we go. And so that that's still probably not big enough. We'll do 100,000, and that's probably a good sized Skydome. And so this is the and so that is the mobile unlit shader. We don't want any shadows or anything like that. We want it to just be a solid texture, which is the sky. So we have so far we've been in the Unity demo, or in the Google VR demo scene, and we are going to go into our own scenes now. So the first thing is going to be folder structure, and for me, I like to create all of the assets that are unique to this game. In other words, they're not they're not an asset from the asset store or something like that. So unique to this game, things that I've created myself for this game. It's going to start with an underscore. So first we'll do underscore scenes, and we already have some custom models. So we're going to say models, and I'm going to create materials. We have material for the skybox already. And so I got the Skydome here, and I'm going to move that into the models. We need to create a new folder for textures. And I'm going to put the sky texture into there. And then we got Google VR, which is, and materials. So I need to bring that into the materials folder and delete this. So we got plugins, Google VR, and the rest is my stuff. We got one texture, no scenes, one model, and one material. And so I'm going to go into the scenes folder and create a, we'll just do new scene right here. We don't want to save the demo scene. And the reason why I'm making a new scene is because that's going to reset all the lighting settings. And so we're going to go through it like this. Now, lighting settings can get really tricky as you build your game, and that's why we're taking care of it now, just like we talked about yesterday with the with all the settings we did yesterday. But here's the reason why. I like to use additive scenes in VR. I have tutorials on the channel for how to do a VR camera setup with additive scenes and how to load those levels. So check that tutorial out on how to do that. However, to make life a lot easier, I also made this tool for specifically for one of the games that I'm making, and so this made it a lot easier to deal with the additive scenes. So there's two options here. You can check out the tutorial for additive scenes, or do it yourself, or you can just get the additive scene manager from the asset store. And remember, whenever you get an asset from the asset store, whether it's mine or another developer's, if they deserve it, give them a 5-star rating, because 5-star rating is the only way to get these assets out there. So when I import this, it's going to have a demo and it's going to have documentation. Now you might want the documentation as a reference. But I'm not going to be using the demo. I just want the package, and I happen to know what's in the documentation, so I'm going to deselect that folder. So I'm just getting the scripts. And that's all I really need in my game to make this work. And so the reason why I'm bringing up additive scenes with lighting is because every single scene has different lighting settings. And so that's, you'll notice when I made a scene here, it came with the skybox, but the demo scene from the Google VR didn't. So whenever that's because when I made a new scene, all the lighting settings are reset. So each scene has its own lighting settings, and that's important to remember, especially if you're doing additive scenes, because when I go from one scene to the next, and the good example is right here. Okay, so you'll see this room is a scene, this room is a scene, and this room is, each room is a scene. So as I go from this room into this room, because I'm changing in between scenes, the lighting settings are actually changing. So it's important to remember that each scene has its own lighting settings. And if I want to make a game and set all these lighting settings up just the way I need them, and then I go and I click File, New Scene, I'm going to have to go set up all those same settings over again and again and again. So it's easier to do all the lighting settings right now in your very first scene, and then do a file save as, and save that scene as a new scene name, like level 2, and then you'll have a level 2. You could delete whatever you don't need out of here, but your lighting settings will stay the same throughout the whole game. And you can adjust them in which scene you need to, but you won't have to go change all the settings again. And so in this scene, this is going to be the VR main scene. So first of all, let me just save this scene as in my scenes folder, and I'm going to call it VR main. And what VR main scene is a scene that has all the basic stuff that I need for VR, like the camera and the player and some of the core game scripts. So right now there's a main camera and a directional light, and the first thing that I'm going to need to do is go into the Google VR prefabs and bring in GVR viewer main, because that's going to turn my main camera. I'm going to put that at 0, 0, 0. That's going to turn my main camera into a Google VR camera. So I got the VR camera here. I can look around if I'm holding Alt. And let me just create a plane so there's some kind of a ground. I'm going to put it at 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to make the scale 10. And then the main camera is down there, and it's also at 0, 0, 0. And so that's not good because it's stuck in the ground. However, you should have your main camera at 0, 0, 0, and its rotation should be at 0, 0, 0. And so we're going to need to make a new game object and call it VR main. And I'm going to set that at 0, 0, 0. And then I'm going to put the camera as a child of it. And then I can move VR main. So I'm going to put VR main at 1, for example. Or perhaps 2. And so now the head, the VR camera is at a height of 2. And so we got the basic setup, because you can't move the main camera, and going forward as this becomes native VR, Unity wants you to keep the main camera at 0, 0, 0 all the time. And so when we need to move the camera, we need to move the VR main. And so later we're gonna have a character controller on this, and probably move this guy around, but for now we're just gonna stand in the middle. We got a ground, a GVR viewer main, and we have a directional light, which is the sun. So this is the basic scene, and anytime we're gonna make a new scene, we can save this scene as a new scene, and then the lighting settings are gonna copy over. But first, let's do those lighting settings. So we've already got into the skybox. We need to delete that, and we need to go to our camera and set clear flags to solid color. And so in order to get a sky into here, we'll select our model Skydome and drag it in and put it at 0, 0, 0. And it has a scale of 1000, so I need to fix that back to 1. Now, I'm going to go to the game view, and you're going to see it says set pass calls to. I'm going to delete the Skydome, and then I got to actually click here. And you'll see that the set pass calls are 1. So because I'm using one material that has one texture on it, that takes one draw call. And so I know that by adding a sky, I go up by one draw call, and I have to stay under 50, so I need to be aware of that and track draw calls as I'm adding them. Okay, so we have the sky, we've got the player. If I hit play, everything looks fine. Well, the ground looks white, and that looks terrible. But anyways, let's go through the lighting settings. We've got skybox, none, sun, none. We could set that to our directional light, but the only reason to do that is for the procedural skybox, where the Unity will draw the sun based on the rotation of this light. But we're not using that skybox, so that doesn't matter to us at all. Our ambient source is going to be set to a color, and we can adjust that color here. And you'll see it's not going to affect the sky because the sky is on lit, but this will affect everything else. Okay, then the next one is the ambient global illumination. And so real time is too expensive for mobile VR. We need to set this to baked. And then we have reflection source, which is the default reflection cube map. And because we are not using the skybox, we could use custom, but we're not generating any cube maps. So the reflection settings actually are per pixel again, and we're not going to be dealing with per pixel effects here, so we could just skip this whole section. And then we got pre-computed real-time global illumination, and we are going to turn that off because we can't do any real-time lighting. This is real-time global illumination, and so we got to turn that off. We got to do baked global illumination. So on the baked lighting, just to make light bakes go a little quicker, I like to set the settings down a little bit, but you do need to adjust these, for your game and see what looks best and what you can fit into the light map. So to start off, I'm going to change this from 40 down to 10 just so that I could bake a little bit quicker while we're building. And the bake padding is 2. That's okay. I'm going to keep compressed on, and then 2 indirect resolution is fine. We could bake ambient collision, and that'll look good, but again, it's going to take a little bit more time to do the ambient collision pass, so I might wait until I'm all done and ready to publish the game, and then I'll have to go into each scene and change the baked resolution up and do any final options that I want. While I'm building, I'm going to keep it at 10, no ambient occlusion. I don't want to do the final gather either, and I like to use an Atlas size a little bit bigger than 1024. I feel like 4096 is kind of big for mobile, and so I'm going to keep that at 2048. And so because there are no light or reflection probes, I'm just going to turn that off. And then we got an option here for what type of light maps, and there's directional and non-directional. I'm going to change it. So it says here directional light maps don't work on OpenGLS 2.0, and so it's going to fall back to non-directional. Well, I know I'm not building for GLS 2.0, but if GLS 2.0 is not capable of dual light maps, so this directional is 2 light maps, and non-directional is just 1. So long story short, for mobile VR, I'm choosing non-directional because that's just 1 light map, and I think it looks good enough on mobile VR as is without having to do the dual light maps. And then the indirect intensity, the bounce boost, I'm going to keep those at default. And then another thing we could do to try to speed up the bake is change it to low resolution. I'm going to keep it on medium, and maybe we'll go to high resolution before we build the final build for Google Play. So fog, again, this type of fog is too expensive for mobile VR. You can't use that. You're going to have to use a different type of fog. And so then other settings, we're not using any halo or flare or spot. And then here is the automatically bake light maps, and I'm going to turn that off because I guess it's kind of a nice feature, but overall it's better to just build the light map when you're ready. That way your computer doesn't completely stop working sometimes while you're trying to work. Okay, so we've set up the lighting settings on our basic scene setup, and so at this point, if I were to, if I want to make a new level and I say new scene, all of that stuff gets lost, reset back to normal, and that might be a good thing, but really, if you're doing if you're doing additive scenes like this, if I was working in this and I just wanted to go into a new scene over here, I wouldn't want to lose all those light settings. I just want to keep them. So in that case, we can open up our scene and we could say save scene as, and call this one, level 1. And so if I'm in level 1 and I look at the lighting settings, I have all the same lighting settings. When I go between those 2 levels, additively, the lighting's going to stay exactly the same. Okay, so I'm going to delete that scene, and now I'm going to make a new game object, and this is going to be my game controller. And on a different day coming up, we'll get into the game controller, and we'll be working in that script throughout the entire project. But instead of programming the game controller today, we're just going to add the scene controller, and that's from this additive scene manager. And again, you don't got to spend money to do this. There's a tutorial on this channel that teaches you how to do additive scene loading. This just makes it a lot easier. So this loads up scenes when the game starts, and I'm gonna add the VR main scene. And actually, the VR main scene is gonna get loaded at the start, anyways. So I'll actually take that out. So we need to set up the sky properly, because the sky I like to have as an additive scene, because if I go inside, I want to turn the sky off and not use that draw call anymore. So I'm going to delete the Skydome. Actually, instead of deleting the Skydome, we're in a scene called level 1. Okay, so I'm going to go back to VR main. I'm going to delete level 1. And I'm going to save this scene as Skydome. And so now I'm in the Skydome scene. So this is a duplicate that's in the other scene. All this stuff is going to go away. So the only thing in the scene is the Skydome. And it's at 0, 0, 0. So I'm going to go back to VR main, and I'm going to delete the Skydome. And really this ground is going to go away. It doesn't belong in VR main. That actually belongs in the not in the Skydome scene, but it belongs in a different scene. And so let me save. I'll undo so it comes back, and I'm going to save this scene as I'm not sure what to call this scene, so I'll call it level 1 again. And it's the only thing in this scene is going to be the plane. So level 1 has a ground. The VR main scene has the camera, and it has the directional light as well. That should get moved probably to the Skydome is the best place for that one, because the sun and the sky are pretty much always going to be linked to each other. So we got the Skydome and the sun, which is a directional light, and this directional light is real time. We're going to set that to baked. We could do mixed. As long as you bake, mixed is okay. But I'm going to set this to baked. Baked light only, because we can't have... Well, we can. Since we're using Legacy Vertex Lit, we can have dynamic lights. But the sun is going to be baked. So we have the sun and the sky in the Skydome. And in the VR main, we have the camera, the VR main setup, GVR viewer main, and that's it. And so I guess I'm going to need to make that game controller again. And I'm going to add the scene controller. And so right now, if I start the game, we have nothing but the blue color that we're clearing. And so I want to load some scenes at the start. I want to load first of all, we're going to need to load the sky. And then I'm also going to go ahead and load the level 01, because that has the ground. And so those two scenes are going to load when the scene starts. And then the persistent scenes are scenes that never get unloaded. And so VR main is a persistent scene. That one should never be unloaded. The sky might be a persistent scene that never gets unloaded, but if I go inside, I might turn the sky off. So I won't add the skies as a persistent scene. And so if I play, I get a null reference exception. And the reason why is because I need to go to my build settings and I need to add all of my scenes here. So I don't want the demo scene anymore. And I do want to have these 3 scenes, but VR main needs to be 0 so that it's the first scene that Unity loads. And because it's scene index 0, that's why I don't need to load that scene at the start, because Unity already is loading this scene at the start. So I'm going to change this to, so the Skydome is kind of the next thing in order there, and then the levels will come after that. So if I press play, it should load these 2 at the start, which is the so you can see I'm back to basically what I had before, which is the Skydome, the ground, and the camera. And if I stop playing, those get unloaded. Now, if I want to work on everything at once, that's fine. I'll just drag the Skydome in like this and level 1 in like this. And so now I'm back to working on everything. And they all have the same lighting settings, which is nice. So we have the basic setup here, and the ground is so white. I want to get something baked, so I'm going to go into level 1, and if I create a 3D object, it's going to put it in the VR main, so I could drag that down into level 1, or I could set level 1 as the active scene. But if I put the cube here to 0, 0, 0, and I just want to do a light bake. So in order to do that, the plane and the cube both need to be set to static, because that's going to set them Lightmap static. And that way they'll get included in the bake. So if I have my objects set as static and I have a light that is set to baked lighting, and I could go to the lighting tab, and I could say build. Now something really funny is going to happen here, because it's not going to actually bake the light. It's not going to do any light maps. It's not going to bake anything. It's going to get done and it's going to say no light maps. And the reason why is because the active scene is VR main. So right now this scene is linked to the active scene, which is a little bit highlighted here. And there's no lights in this scene, and there's no objects in this scene. So there's nothing to bake. So if I set this as the active scene and bake, there's the Skydome. Oh, it did bake something. It does have a light map, but we should see no lighting on down here on the floor or on the cube, because that scene doesn't have any light maps, and we could see that in the scenes folder, because the only folder that got created here was VR main, and it has a light map on something. I'm not sure what it it just must be empty, I guess. I could go to the Lightmaps and look, but yeah, it just looks empty. So what we can do if we look at Unity's light mapping API, there is a bake multiple scenes. So lightmapping.bake multiple scenes will bake the lighting on multiple scenes at once, which is what I want to do here. I want it to bake the lighting on all these scenes at once, so it takes the sun from this scene and it bakes it onto the objects that are in this scene. So let me save it, everything, and then I'm going to go in here. I'm going to clear the bake data, and instead of writing a script right now, I've already done that for this, for my tool here. And I have a button here that says bake light maps on all open scenes, and all that's doing is calling this with a string to the paths of the scenes that are open. So I'm going to say bake light maps on all open scenes. And before I do that, I think I've made a mistake with the Skydome, because the Skydome is static, but I don't want it to be in the light map. So I'm going to deselect this. And I don't want it to cast any shadows, and I don't want it to receive any shadows. So I'm going to save that. So our Skydome is set up to, it's static, but don't put it into the light maps. And don't cast any shadows from it, and don't receive any shadows. And so on the plane, we got cast shadows on and receive shadows. It'd probably be fine if the ground doesn't cast shadows, but I definitely want the cube to cast shadows and receive shadows. So all these options are important on every single object that you put into your scene. These two are set to static, and they're going to be casting and receiving shadows. The Skydome is static, but not light map static. I don't want it in the light map. And it's not going to cast shadows, and it's not going to receive shadows. So now that I have everything set up, I should be able to go to my game controller, and on my scene controller script, I can say bake light maps on all open scenes. And this just gives me a warning that you're going to bake lighting on 3 scenes. Okay. And I guess somewhere along the way, the sun had got set to no shadows. Maybe it came that way. I don't remember changing that. So I'm gonna change it. Soft shadows are okay if they're baked. And so I'm gonna say soft shadows because it's gonna be baked. And so I'm gonna say clear the baked data again, and let's go back to the bake multiple light maps button. Alright, the bake's finished, and so this time it actually worked. And we could see, it looks like my cube's even floating, but we could see it baked in the shadows there. And so we should be able to hit play, and now the game shouldn't look so bad to where the ground was so white and bright before. Now we actually got it baked in there, and then we could go to our ambient color and decide what color. But with baked lighting, the ambient won't take an effect anymore, because the bake looked at the ambient color when it made the bake. So we would need to adjust the color at this point. We would need to delete the light map and change the color. So if I clear bake data, I can change the color here and see how that's gonna. And if I were to make it green or something and do the bake, whoops, that type of bake won't work. We need to go to the game controller and do a bake like this. So now that green color has been baked in. Anyways, I could change my ambient color back to where it was, something like this. And so you could see, anyways, that these lighting settings are going right into the bake, and we want to have all the same settings throughout our levels, unless we want to change it. And you know, if we're on the alien planet, we want it to be green, then we could go in and change that. Okay, so I just did one last bake, and things are looking good. I got 10 draw calls. It changes on what's in the camera's frustum, but the 10 draw calls. We got the sky in there, and which is a Skydome. We got baked lighting. All of our lighting is set up. We're ready to start making some levels. And you know, as I make the game, I might change the skybox out. Well, I will, because I can't use this commercially unless I buy it. But this was just for demo purposes, so we'll end up changing the sky out for something else. I have some skies I can use, but I wanted to demonstrate how to make that from scratch. So anyways, we should be done for day 3, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing what type of games you make, so stay tuned for day 4. That's tomorrow, believe it or not. See you guys soon.